In 2001, deep in the dark, turbulent waters of the Mississippi River, an angler named Charles Ashley Jr. hooked into an absolute leviathan. After a grueling battle against the heavy current, he pulled a 116-pound, 12-ounce blue catfish over the rail of his boat, shattering the state and world records. The multi-billion-dollar fishing tackle industry would have loved to plaster their corporate logos all over this legendary catch. They would have loved to claim that a proprietary, laboratory-engineered dip bait or a $20 high-tech artificial lure pulled that apex river monster from the depths, but they could not, because the bait that Charles Ashley Jr. used to secure his world record was an ordinary $1.50 can of processed luncheon meat, specifically a chunk of Spam, pulled straight from a grocery store pantry. Walk down the catfish aisle of any major sporting goods retailer today, and you will see shelves lined with imported stink baits, complex punch baits, and specialized dip tubes. The industry charges you premium prices for tubs of coagulated cheese, synthetic blood compounds, and artificial thickeners. The glossy packaging guarantees a massive, unavoidable scent cloud that will draw fish from miles away. But these commercial baits harbor a deliberate mechanical flaw engineered purely for planned obsolescence: rapid hydrodynamic washout. When you drop a commercial dip bait into a fast-moving river, the sheer force of the current begins to immediately strip the soft paste from your hook. Within 15 minutes, the proprietary sludge dissolves entirely into the water column. You reel up an empty, bare piece of steel. You are forced to reach your hand back into that expensive tub, apply more bait, and cast again. The industry did not design a bait to stay on your hook. They designed a fast-dissolving consumable product that forces you to constantly rebait, ensuring you empty the container quickly and return to the store to buy more. Processed luncheon meat operates on an entirely different level of biological permanence and fluid dynamics. To understand why this cheap grocery item systematically outfishes premium tackle, we have to dissect its specific chemical matrix. A standard block of Spam is predominantly composed of minced pork, ham, water, modified potato starch, sugar, and two critical additives, sodium chloride and sodium nitrite. Then, when you analyze its macronutrient profile, it is an absolute biological bomb of high-density calories, consisting of 15% to 20% pure animal lipids and fats, alongside 12% to 15% raw protein. To a massive bottom-feeding predator like a blue catfish or a channel catfish, this is not just food. It is a metabolic necessity. These apex predators hunt in deep, muddy environments with absolute zero visibility. They do not use their eyes to find prey. Instead, their entire bodies are covered in hundreds of thousands of independent taste receptors, effectively making them giant swimming tongues that constantly sample the chemical composition of the water. When you throw a chunk of cheap processed meat into the river, the heavy pork lipids do not instantly wash away like a synthetic water-based gel. These animal fats are highly hydrophobic, meaning they naturally resist immediate dissolution in water. Instead, the extreme concentration of sodium chloride, the salt used to cure and preserve the meat, creates a continuous, unrelenting osmotic pressure underwater. The fresh river water naturally attempts to invade the cellular structure of the salty meat cube to balance the salinity. As the water pushes in, this osmotic pressure rhythmically forces the trapped oils, amino acids, and animal fats out into the environment in a slow, controlled release. This creates an incredibly dense, sustained lipid corridor. Unlike a quick burst of commercial scent that vanishes, the processed meat acts as a slow-release chemical engine. The heavy oil droplets rise and drift horizontally with the current, creating a miles-long olfactory highway. When a massive catfish detects these pure animal fats miles downstream, its central nervous system locks onto the gradient. It tracks the scent directly back to the source, finding a solid, highly caloric piece of protein that has survived the heavy river current. However, you cannot simply open the can, cut a piece off, and throw it on a hook. That is the critical mistake that amateurs make. If you use it straight out of the tin, the meat is far too soft and fragile. Small nuisance fish will peck it apart in seconds, and the sheer G-force of a heavy cast will rip the hook right through the delicate flesh. The secret to weaponizing this bait lies in altering its thermodynamics before it ever touches the water. During the brutal heat of the summer, take your can of processed meat, slice it into 1-inch cubes, and place them on top of your white cooler under the blazing midday sun. You are going to let them bake. As the intense ultraviolet heat penetrates the cubes, a critical physical transformation occurs. The heat pre-melts the internal animal fat, drawing the heavy pork oils to the surface, where they form a slick, glistening film. Simultaneously, the exposure to the open air causes the exterior of the meat to undergo severe desiccation. The outside dries out, forming a tough, highly elastic, leathery crust around the cube. This sun-baked crust is the perfect mechanical armor. It shields the bait from the aggressive river current and stops small bait fish from tearing it apart. Meanwhile, the center remains soft and loaded with liquefied fats, ready to pump out an intense scent trail the moment it hits the water. Even with a toughened exterior, you must rig this bait with engineering precision. In Europe, where specimen carp and barbel anglers have used luncheon meat to dominate highly pressured waters for decades, they do not simply thread it onto a standard J-hook. They utilize a hair rig, a specialized setup that allows the bait to dangle just below the bare hook. But to prevent the thin braided hair from slicing through the meat like a wire through cheese during a 100-yard cast, they employ an ingenious internal support system. Take a small piece of a plastic drinking straw or a hollow tube of dried macaroni. Push this plastic or pasta cylinder directly through the center of your sun-baked meat cube. Then, thread your hair rig directly through the center of the straw and secure it with a wide plastic bait stop. The straw acts as a rigid internal bushing. It distributes the immense force of a heavy cast across the entire core of the meat, making it virtually indestructible. You can launch a massive piece of processed meat into a raging river channel, and it will survive the impact, completely intact and ready to broadcast its chemical payload. For river environments with brutal flow, you can scale up. Use a massive chunk of meat and completely bury a large hook deep inside, a technique known as rolling meat, allowing it to bounce naturally along the bottom without snagging on debris. The sheer biological effectiveness of this cheap grocery store bait is not a myth. It is an ecological reality so powerful that it has fundamentally disrupted modern fishery management, leading to strict, outright bans in some of the most prestigious commercial waters in the world. Take Lindholm Lakes, a massive, highly competitive match fishing complex in the United Kingdom. The ownership was forced to institute a total ban on the use of luncheon meat during open matches and festivals. The multi-billion-dollar tackle industry wants you to believe that fish prefer their perfectly engineered, highly digestible synthetic pellets. But the truth is, when given the choice, fish will gorge themselves on cheap, high-fat processed meat to the point of total biological overload. The management at Lindholm Lakes discovered through extensive observation that it takes a carp an entire 3 days to fully digest a meal of fatty luncheon meat, whereas a standard commercial aquaculture pellet passes through their digestive system in just 1 hour. The extreme fat and caloric density of the processed pork was so irresistible to the fish that anglers were bringing up to a dozen cans of meat to a single match just to keep the frenzy going. The resulting fatty waste from tons of meat being thrown into the water created massive, greasy slicks and floating scum on the surface of the lakes. Furthermore, the uneaten meat was actually altering the topography of the lakes themselves. Areas that were originally excavated to a depth of 6 feet had been reduced to 4 feet purely due to the massive accumulation of undigested meat waste sitting on the bottom, refusing to break down quickly like natural baits. The fishery didn't ban the bait because it was ineffective. They banned it because it was an unstoppable biological superweapon that completely overrode the fish's natural feeding patterns and actively altered the physical environment of the lake. You don't need a corporate sponsor or a $20 tub of laboratory-engineered paste to outsmart an apex predator that hunts in the dark. The industry wants you to remain entirely dependent on their supply chain. They want you buying scents that wash off in the current, plastics that lose their effectiveness after a single strike, and proprietary rigs that cost a fortune to replace. But the raw physics of the water and the neurobiology of the fish do not respond to price tags or branding. They respond to osmotic pressure, lipid dispersion, and concentrated amino acids. By buying a $1.50 can of processed meat, utilizing the sun to alter its physical structure through desiccation, and engineering a simple internal straw bushing to secure it, you are deploying a tactical feeding trap that evolution spent millions of years programming these fish to track. If you are tired of playing the consumer game and want to understand the raw, documented biology behind what truly makes a fish strike, subscribe to this channel. We are breaking down the science, the hydrodynamics, and the forgotten survival methods that the modern tackle industry is desperately trying to bury. Now I want to hear from you. The knowledge we share in the comments is the absolute foundation of this resistance against corporate fishing marketing. What is the most unusual, bizarre, or incredibly cheap item from your kitchen pantry that you or your grandfather have ever used to catch a monster fish? Did the fish ignore it, or did it trigger an absolute feeding frenzy? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your real-world field tests often drive the direction of our next scientific breakdown. Keep your hooks sharp, trust the raw chemistry of the water, and I will see you out there.